Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a recent graduate from UCLA as well as productivity coach. What I do is I help college students just like you to become productive and raise your GPA to 3.5 plus on top of still having time for your life and your career, friends and family, hobbies, working out, so on and so forth. But with that aside, let's get started with today's topic. Now, today we're going to talk about three things you can do today to get a 4.0 GPA in any college. Now, first things first, let me move my face right here. Actually, let's actually move it to right here. Now, the first things first, we're going to talk about sleep schedule, right? Now, I recommend in college for college students sleep at least 7 hours a day. I recommend 8 hours, but minimum 7 hours a day. Obviously, some people are taking like six, seven, eight classes a semester, so on and so forth. So it may not be possible to get like 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep on a daily basis, right? But I would say minimum 7 hours a day, recommended about 8 hours. Now, sleep is important because it's going to help you become more productive and your focus increase, right? Because think about it. When you get no sleep, no rest, no proper sleep, right? You're not going to have that productivity. Never, right? And obviously that results in bad grades. A lot of people think that they can just sacrifice sleep just to get in some more studying, but it may not be worth it at all because if you don't get your proper sleep, you're not going to have that energy, focus, productivity, bad grades, right? Now, just for some math, right? As for like numbers and all that, right? You have a 24 hours a day and we're getting, let's say, recommended hours, 8 hours of sleep, right? You still have 16 hours of waking time. And that is a lot of time that you can do a lot of stuff, right? So it really comes down to how efficiently and how effectively you can use that 16 hours of waking time, right? So that leads me to consistency. Again, you have 16 hours of waking time, right? And it depends on how efficiently you can use that 16, right? So it doesn't really matter what time you wake up and what time you go to bed, right? A lot of people say, yes, you need to wake up at 5, 6 a.m. to really get good grades and all that kind of stuff to become productive or whatever. But no, it depends on how effectively you can use the 16 hours, right? It doesn't really matter what time you wake up and go to bed as long as you stay consistent with it, right? So think about it. If you're waking up at 5 sometimes, and the next day you wake up at 10, and you're going to bed at sometimes 3 in the morning, and sometimes you go to bed really early at 10 p.m. If you're all over the place with your sleep schedule, this is not going to work, right? So it's okay to wake up at, let's be a little bit extreme here. Let me maybe if you wake up at 11 a.m. in the morning, if your schedule let's do that, right? Your classes and or whatever, right? If you can wake up at 11 a.m., right? And if you're fine with it, stay consistent with it, right? So if you're waking up at let's say 11, it's a little bit extreme, but let's say for the sake of example, right? 11, which means you're going to bed around like let's say like I don't know, like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, like something like that to get that 8 hours, right? As long as you're staying consistent with that, you are good. All right. So there we go. Now, again, when it comes to energy level, a lot of people they pull off all-nighters, staying up late, thinking that they just can do a little more work, thinking that they're night owl or whatever that is, right? By the time it's 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., you've been already awake, let's say for 10, 12, 14 hours at this point, right? So you're not going to be as productive as you were in the morning or earlier in the day. And what happens is the quality of your study and quality of your work goes down significantly, which is obviously not good, right? So chances are more than half of more than 50% of the work that you're doing after a certain point of your day, let's say for the sake of example, about 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., right, could be just waste of time, right? So I'll try to do my best to avoid all-nighters and staying up late, right? Because again, it just affects your energy level. And again, energy level, it starts going down once you wake up and start your day. Because once you start your day, you're using your energy, right? There we go. Now, another one, I don't like to really support the idea of having the motivation because motivation is just an emotion, it's a feeling, it just comes and goes, it's really temporary because I support the idea of discipline, right? But motivation is a big issue, right? And sleep schedule has a lot to do with motivation, right? I'm just going to read it out loud. If you don't have any consistency with your sleep schedule, that means you got messed up energy cycle. Again, sleep schedule, it has to do a lot with productivity, focus, and all that, right? You got messed up energy cycle, right? Less productivity focus, and you're more likely to procrastinate because you're not productive and you feel lazy now, right? And of course, no motivation results in bad grades, right? So before you even try to do anything, studying strategies or whatever that is, right? Make sure you get your sleep schedule back on track to make anything happen to begin with, right? So that's the first one, sleep schedule. And with that, let's move on to the second one, which is study consistently. Now, when I say study consistently, I mean study even when you do not have any exams or homeworks coming up, right? Think about it. You can always review your notes or textbooks and resolve or redo your homework problems even when you don't have any exams or homeworks coming up, correct? Right? You can even always review after lectures, etc. just for like 10, 20, 15, 30 minutes or so. It's not a big deal, right? And this is what I call actual studying. You're not necessarily studying by doing homework, because when you're just doing homework, it's just for the sake of submission, right? And when you're studying for exams, now you're under pressure, right? And you're just doing it for the sake of getting good grades on exams, right? You need to actually study. And that actual studying happens when you do it on your own, like when you're reviewing for lectures or when you've done your homework, but you still go back to your homeworks or textbook problems and redo them, practice them on your own. That's what I call the actual studying, right? And if you do this consistently, right, it's going to help you cut down so much time when you study for exams. Because think about it. Even when exams are not coming up, let's say exams are coming up, let's say a month or two later, right? But you're still studying. You're reviewing after lectures. Even if you've done your homework, you kind of go back and study as if you're studying for exams, right? When exams are now coming up, let's say 5 days before the exam, you're not going to have to do too much because you already have been studying technically. Just have to go back and study a little bit here and there, review here and there, and that's it, right? So study consistently, right? And now, when it comes to also retaining information, right? Think about it. You don't study at all on a regular days, and you only study when exams are, like, let's say 5 days out, right? And that's basically cramming for exams, right? And when you're cramming for exams, when you're running out of time, right? You just force yourself to memorize and just study. And you know what happens after the exam? You forget everything, right? And let's say when finals are coming up, you have to go back and study again and again and again because you forgot everything, right? We don't want that because that's another waste of time, right? But if you study consistently, right? Again, even when you don't have any exams necessarily coming up right now, right? You're taking your time to study, right? You're taking your time to really process, understand, and retain information, right? And if you do that, you can retain information a long time, which means when you have finals or whatever exams you got going on, right? Again, you can cut down your studying time, which is saving time, right? So study consistently, even when you don't have any exams or homeworks coming up right now, right? That's going to help you cut down so much of your time when it comes to preparation for exams and all that kind of stuff, and even help you with retaining information, right? Now, that leads me to the last one, the third one, which is know how you're spending your time, right? This is one of the biggest mistakes that we all make. I used to make this mistake, my students, everyone, right? If you don't have control of your time, you got no control over your life. Think about it, right? 4 years in college is a lot of time, right? But if you don't have control of your time, if you're just getting by and going with the flow and just wasting time, you're potentially wasting 4 years in college. And 4 years is a lot of time, right? You can literally change your life, transform your entire life within that 4 years, right? You could be a completely different life with a completely different person, right? Now, when it comes to time management, right, and when I say know how you're spending your time, I mean to say you need to know how exactly, right, how many hours you're spending in classes, eating, walking, commuting, right, sleeping, studying, working out, everything, right? Of course, the numbers that you see right here is not going to be accurate, right? Of course, you can't count any seconds or like 2 minutes. You can't do that, but you got to be at least having an idea of how much time you're spending in each tasks, right? Now, with that, there's a simple math or calculation that you can do. That's called a 168 hours math, right? 168, that number is coming from basically 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. That's the total number of hours that you have on a weekly basis, right? You can do some math, a very simple math, right? Just write things down on a paper or whatever, right? For example, you're sleeping 8 hours a day for 7 days a week. That's about what, 60 or 56 hours a week, right? In total that you're putting in sleeping, right? Same thing for your classes or whatever, working out, commuting, working, or whatever, club meetings and all that. Do that math. Rough estimation is completely fine. This math is just so you know how you're spending your time, right? So make sure we do that. Now, one last thing. If you're just getting by and you're just going with the flow, you're just reacting to the things that are just happening around you instead of having control over them, right? That's the worst thing that could happen. Again, you have a lot of time, right? You have 4 years in college, even on a weekly basis, right? You have 168 hours, right? Even except if you exclude, right, 56 hours of sleep, let's say 60 hours, you still have about 10 hours a week or 100 hours a week, right? And you could be wasting that if you don't get it right, right? Again, it depends on how you spend it, right? You have a lot of time. Don't say you don't have a lot of time, right? You're not running out of time. You have a lot of time, but you're just wasting a lot of time because you don't know how you're spending your time exactly, right? Do this math, and it could turn out you literally have like 50 hours of free time on a weekly basis, and you've been wasting time, right? So these are 3 things that you can do literally today. Get your sleep schedule right, study consistently, do some math and calculation with your time and hours and all that, right? To get 4.0 GPA in any college. It doesn't matter if you're smart. It doesn't matter if you're taking like whatever classes or major. It doesn't matter. This applies for any students who's been trying to really get things right, who's been feeling really burnt out, who's been really studying hard and all that, right? This applies for everything. So yeah, try this. Now, with that, couple more words, right? Take action. I give you a lot of information today, but information without implementation is completely useless, right? It all comes down to you taking action, right? You may have all the information, you may have read all the books in the world and all that, right? But if you don't take action, if you don't implement those information into your life, nothing's going to happen, right? If you like this video, even if you find this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe. I'll be putting out so many videos like this from this point on. And if you want to get connected with me on Instagram, go follow me on Instagram at Tom Kims, right? But other than that, yes, talk to you guys soon.